Welcome to Immigration Insight, where we break down the latest legal developments impacting immigrants in the United States. I'm your host, Harry, and today we're covering a deeply troubling case. The US indictment of an Indian government official, Vikash Yadav, accused of orchestrating an assassination plot against Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, a Sikh separatist leader residing in New York. This case touches not only on legal and diplomatic tensions between the US and India, but also has potentially far-reaching implications for Indian immigrants, particularly the Sikh and non-Sikh communities in America. In order to understand the broader implications of this case, we also need to look back at history and examine how other immigrant communities were affected by geopolitical tensions. Today we'll discuss what happened to Middle Eastern and Muslim communities in the US after the events of September 11, 2001, and how those patterns of fear, suspicion, and increased scrutiny could similarly affect Indian immigrants in the wake of this case.
Thanks for having me, Harry. This is a serious case with far-reaching consequences. The US Justice Department has charged Yadav, a former officer in India's intelligence service, with organizing an assassination plot on US soil. The target, Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, is a Sikh activist advocating for a separate Sikh homeland, Khalistan. This case underscores the risks faced by those involved in political dissent, even when they've sought refuge in countries like the US.
Shah, given your experience, what kind of parallels can we draw between this case and the treatment of Muslim and Middle Eastern communities after 9/11? Could Indian immigrants face similar challenges in light of these allegations?
That's a great question, Harry. After 9/11, the Muslim and Middle Eastern communities in the US experienced severe backlash. There was a sharp increase in racial profiling, surveillance, and detentions under the guise of national security. Thousands of immigrants from Muslim-majority countries were placed under special registration programs, like the National Security Entry-Exit Registration System, or NSERS, which subjected them to additional screenings, monitoring, and even deportations. Law enforcement agencies became hyper-vigilant, and many Muslim immigrants were viewed with suspicion regardless of their personal backgrounds or ties to terrorism. The psychological and social impact of 9/11 was also profound. Muslim and Middle Eastern communities faced hate crimes, workplace discrimination, and social isolation. For years, individuals who had no connection to extremism or terrorism were subjected to heightened scrutiny simply because of their ethnicity or religion. This resulted in a culture of fear and alienation that still lingers today. Now, if we look at the current situation with the Indian government's involvement in this assassination plot, it's easy to see how something similar could happen to the Indian community, especially if tensions between the US and India continue to rise.
That's a sobering comparison. Do you think Indian immigrants, especially Sikhs or those critical of the Indian government, could experience similar levels of scrutiny or backlash?
It's certainly possible. After 9/11, it wasn't just Muslims who were targeted. Anyone who looked Middle Eastern or was perceived as other could face harassment. In this case, with the US charging an Indian government official for orchestrating an assassination, there could be a ripple effect. While the Sikh community, particularly those involved in Khalistan activism, might feel the immediate impact, the broader Indian immigrant community, whether Hindu, Sikh, Muslim, or non-religious, could be subject to increased suspicion and scrutiny. If this case continues to escalate, we might see increased vetting of Indian nationals applying for visas, green cards, or even citizenship. Security checks could become more thorough, particularly for those with ties to the Indian government, the intelligence sector, or political activism. This could echo what happened after 9/11, where entire communities were viewed through the lens of national security risks.
Given the political nature of this case, could we also see an uptick in hate crimes or discrimination against Indian immigrants, similar to what Muslim and Middle Eastern communities faced after 9/11?
Unfortunately, yes. Hate crimes often rise when there's a national or international incident involving a particular group. After 9/11, Sikhs were also mistakenly targeted in hate crimes because of their turbans and beards, which were wrongly associated with terrorism. The same could happen now, especially if media coverage frames this case as a broader reflection of Indian immigrants. While the majority of Indian nationals in the US have no connection to these events, negative perceptions could grow, especially in a climate where immigration and national security are already hot-button issues. Sikh immigrants may feel the brunt of this, as they are more visible due to religious attire, and the history of political tension between Sikhs and the Indian government is well known. However, non-Sikh immigrants could also face discrimination, particularly if the case fuels anti-Indian sentiment. With India's intelligence services implicated in such a serious plot, any connection to the Indian state, whether real or perceived, might trigger increased suspicion.
You've raised an important point about how political tensions abroad can fuel domestic issues here. What can Indian immigrants, Sikh and non-Sikh, do to protect themselves legally and personally in light of this case?
First and foremost, it's important for Indian immigrants to understand their legal rights in the US. If someone feels they are being unfairly scrutinized or targeted due to their nationality, ethnicity, or political views, they should immediately seek legal counsel. Immigration attorneys can help individuals navigate issues like increased security checks, asylum claims, or even hate crime incidents. For activists, particularly those advocating for causes like Khalistan, it's crucial to stay aware of personal safety and security. The US offers legal protections, but as we've seen in this case, even being on American soil might not shield someone from foreign threats. Reporting any suspicious activities to law enforcement and maintaining vigilance is essential. Additionally, community advocacy and support networks can play a big role in protecting immigrant communities from discrimination. After 9/11, Muslim and Middle Eastern communities leaned heavily on civil rights organizations to help fight against profiling, discrimination, and wrongful detentions. Indian immigrants should take similar steps to ensure that their rights are protected and that they're not unfairly targeted due to the actions of a foreign government.
Shah, as we look at the broader picture, how do you think this case might affect US-India relations, and what are the potential long-term implications for the Indian diaspora in the US?
This case undoubtedly puts a strain on US-India relations. India is a key ally for the US, particularly in balancing China's growing influence in the region, but allegations of state-sponsored assassination plots can't be ignored. As the investigation continues, there could be broader implications for trade, diplomatic relations, and even immigration policies between the two countries. For the Indian diaspora, this creates a precarious situation. Indian immigrants who work in sensitive sectors, like tech, defense, or intelligence, may face increased scrutiny. Visa applications, green card renewals, and even citizenship processes could be delayed or subjected to additional checks. This could disproportionately affect highly skilled immigrants on H-1B or L-1A visas, as well as those applying for EB-1A or NIW green cards. And on a broader level, we could see a shift in how Indian immigrants are perceived in the US. Just as Middle Eastern and Muslim communities were unfairly associated with terrorism after 9/11, Indian immigrants could find themselves unfairly associated with political violence or espionage, even though the vast majority have no connection to such activities.
It's clear that this case has far-reaching implications not just for US-India relations, but for Indian immigrants living in America. Whether Sikh or non-Sikh, all members of the Indian community should be aware of the potential risks and challenges they might face in the coming months. Shah, thank you again for your insights today.
It's always a pleasure, Harry. I encourage anyone who is concerned about their immigration status, security, or rights to reach out to a legal professional. This is a complex and evolving situation, and it's important to be proactive.
That's all for today's episode of Immigration Insight. We'll continue to monitor this story closely and provide updates as they become available. In the meantime, stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay safe. Until next time, I'm Harry, signing off.